Okay, so let's see the practical app we are going to develop in this lesson. So when you run the app, you will see that it runs on multiple devices. So it's a simple app we are developing. The focus here is about flexible layouts, to use constraint layout and to apply the techniques of constraint layout and to make your app to be flexible. So it's like flexible layouts. And the purpose of this lesson is for you to understand about how to develop apps so that you can achieve screen compatibility. So that when the app is running on multiple devices with different screen sizes, and then how to help device compatibility. So let's see how to develop this app, plus let's do a detailed discussion on important techniques of this. So let's go and do it now. Hi everybody, welcome to the lesson Android Screen Compatibility, Support Different Screen Sizes, Part 1, Flexible Layouts. So when you look at this topic, this is Part 1 of supporting different screen sizes, and the technique we are discussing here is to use flexible layouts. So which means you can use this concept of flexible layouts and support different screen sizes, which makes your Android app screen compatible. So so look at the previous lessons to understand what is screen compatibility. Look at the lessons before this. These are the tools we will be using for this lecture. Make sure to cover these prerequisites before you do this lecture. So in this session you will learn about screen compatibility, and as I said earlier, how to support different screen sizes using this concept of flexible layouts. So when you say flexible layouts, what Android recommends is to use a layout called constraint layout. That is what the Android developer docs recommends. So we have to use constraint layout. That is one thing, and then the other thing is we have to make sure that we avoid hard coding the sizes. Let's say if there's a button, we should not give a fixed width and a height, like we should not hard code it. Instead of that, we can use techniques like wrap content or match parent. And if we are using linear layout instead of constraint layout, then there's a property called layout weight where you can specify it rather than hard coding the sizes. However, keep in mind it's recommended to use constraint layout over linear layout. So which means always try to use constraint layout first, not the linear layout. But if you're using linear layout, you can use layout weight property as well. So the idea here is to make the layout flexible so that either use constraint layouts and then avoid hard coding layout sizes like we discussed over here. So flexible layouts is one way of achieving the screen, supporting different screen sizes. So try to use the constraint layout. We'll do a practical now, then you will see it in a little while. So the best way to create a responsive layout for different screen sizes is to use constraint layout as the base layout. So that's what we said earlier. So you will see what is constraint layout practically in a while. So but constraint layout allows you to specify the position and size for each view according to spatial relationships with other views in the layout. So what this means is when you have constraint layout, it allows you to specify the position and the size of each view. When you say each view, a view can be a button, a text box, a label, radio button, anything. So the constraint layout allows to specify the position and the size. The position means x, y coordinates, for example. Size means the width and the height. Okay, so you can specify those according to spatial relationships with other views. Other views means other components. So if you have a screen in your app, if you have activity or fragment, when you have the views means the labels and the buttons, text boxes, you can specify these width, height positions in related to the other views, right? So you saw this already in one of our previous lessons, which is the calculator example. So in the simple calculate app we developed in this lesson series earlier, we covered the constraint layout, but this lesson is an official lesson coming under screen compatibility, device compatibility, adaptive user interface. So we are discussing it again, but more focused towards achieving screen compatibility. This time we are discussing more focus towards achieving screen compatibility. So second bullet point, then this way all the views can move and stretch together as the screen size changes. So when you use constraint layout and specify the relationship positions in related to other views, the advantage is when when you move a view, all the other views will move relate to that, in relation to that, plus when it stretch, everything will stretch together. So when you say stretch, what we mean by stretch here is, let's say if your app, you develop an app and it's running on a mobile Android mobile phone, but let's say another user runs your app on a larger screen like a tab or on an Android TV. So now the screen size is getting larger, so the components will have to stretch or shrink. That is what we talk here, and the stretching and shrinking will happen automatically. So now then continuing flexible layouts, avoid also make sure to avoid hard coding the layout size as discussed earlier. Then again, if you are using linear layout, as we said little while ago, try to use a property called layout weight. But if you look at these last two bullet points, due to performance problems, it's recommended to use constraint layout over linear layout. So if possible, wherever possible, use constraint layout, not the linear layout. Lesson plan is going to be practical demonstrations as usual. So now let's go and do the practical for this. So if you look at the developer docs, it says under flexible layout, by default, Android resize your app layout to fit the current screen. So we have discussed this. To ensure layout resizes well, even for small variations in screen sizes, you need to implement your layout with flexibility. So even though it happens automatically, we have to make sure that we implement the screen layout in a very flexible manner. So that's what we are discussing here. And then you can, if you look at constraint layouts, it is a specific layout type, right, which we have used earlier in the simple calculate app. So it is the recommended or the best way to create responsive layouts. It is use the layout with the layout editor, so that you don't have to type any coding. You can just drag and use the Android layout editor and apply and do things. If you look at building responsive UI interface with constraint layout, these are developer references. So for example, if you got say three components A, B and C, the A can be, let's say, a label, the B can be a text box, C can be a button or any component. So in figure 1 it says, let's read this. It says in figure 1 the layout looks good, right? Figure 1 in the editor. So when you put your components like this, it will look nice, it will look good, but because there is no vertical constraint on view C. So what are constraints? We will show you in a little while when we do the practical. This, when you put your views, these arrows are the constraints. So you have to give the constraints. So you have to give at least one horizontal constraint and one vertical constraint. So for component A, there is a horizontal constraint given, which is this one, and there's a vertical constraint given, which is this one. Then for component B, there's a horizontal constraint plus there's a vertical constraint given vertical means from the top, horizontal means let's say from the left for you to understand. But if you look at component C, there's a constraint given from left and right but not from the top, so which means it has not given a vertical constraint. So what will happen is, because of that, when this runs on the device, this view C, let's say if C is a button, the button will horizontally align with the left and right edges of view A. That's fine, but because there's no vertical constraint, the button will appear at the top of the screen, right? We will show you it practically, right? So let's do the practical now. So let's say in your project, if you go to the layout, and let's put, let's say, a label, a text box and a button. Okay, so now I have just added two labels and one text box and a button from the toolbox, and now I have not given any of the constraints. I just drag and drop this. Right now, let's run and see what's going to happen. So as you can see, when you run in the output, the components are not where you place them. The reason is you didn't provide the constraints. So we have to provide the constraints in this constraint layout. And also, why do we call this as constraint layout? You will see if you go to the code of the XML, you can see that all these text boxes, buttons you place, they are inside constraint layout. So what you have to do in flexible layout development is you have to constrain these components as discussed earlier. Also, I'm we going to add an image to the end, so I have to put the image to the drawable. So let's right click on drawable and say show in Explorer. So then over here inside drawable, I'm going to copy an image. So when I copy the image, I'm getting this error telling file must contain only lowercase, so it can't contain uppercase letters. So in my image, you can see there's uppercase letters, so I have to just go and rename them into lowercase letters. So let's say employee 1 JPG, right? Okay, so now let me compile this. So just remember those important things. Okay, so I just compiled it. So let's drag a image view, and then let's select this image employee 1. Right? Let's click OK, and then we will have to resize it a bit, right? So in order to constrain, you have to provide at least so what you do is you click on this circle over here and you drag your mouse, then you give a horizontal constraint, and if you want to center this, you can drag this and give to the right. So now it centers horizontally. Then you click on the upper circle and drag it towards the top, so it gives you a vertical constraint, and then you slightly move it. So this is how you constrain in a constraint layout. And then you take the second component, and as a best practice, you constrain this not to the top but to the the component above you, which is the title label, and you constrain to the left. So as best practice, from when you give the vertical constraint, you constrain to the nearest view, not to the top. And then the text box, you click here and you just drag your mouse into this corner, and then you can just remove it a little bit, and then from top you can constrain it to the top. Also, there's a technique. What you can do is, if you want to have this and this aligned, in a equal line, you can do this next thing I'm going to do now. You can right click on this and say show baseline, then it shows this baseline, and then you drag your mouse from here to the baseline of the label. So what it does is it will keep these two text in the same level. Now if I run, what will happen is the first three components will appear nicely, but the last two, the button and the image, will not come in the right place. So the button and the image is not in the right place, but the other three are in the right place. So now if I click on the button, what you have to do is give a, let's say, a horizontal constraint, then move it, then give the vertical constraint, let's say towards whatever the nearest view above you, right? And let's put a few properties. I just gave the text property as save, and then the, let's say, the image view, you can constrain to the left, then you can constrain to the right, and then you click here and constrain to the nearest neighboring view, right? So now let's run this. So what we did was, we constrained each component, we constrained each view. So now you can see in the output all the components are in right place. But still this is not enough. This is the beginning of flexible layouts, constraint layouts. So now I have centered the label, right? The HRMS app, this title. Now if I run this on a tablet, let's say if I run this on a tab, right? So you can run this on multiple emulators. So if I run this on a tab as well, so a tab has a slightly different screen. So you will get smaller tabs, larger tabs. In this one it looks like a smaller tab, but as you can see, it has centered the title in the tab, and also it has centered the image in the tab. So those things will happen automatically, and you can see that it has slightly, according to the screen size, it has slightly changed the dimensions of the buttons. So those things, if you want to have the same look and feel, we'll be talking more in the next lessons. But now the idea is, when you say screen compatibility or device compatibility, the idea is your app can run on multiple devices. So if I run this on another device, let's say if I run this on, let's click another device, right? So you will see your app, the user can run your app on multiple devices. So that is the most important thing here. The user can run your app on multiple devices. So now I'm running it on another device. But now if you look in this device, you can see that the image is not visible properly. So that is the whole point of this lecture, to discuss these to discuss how to solve these issues, and these lessons comes under screen compatibility. So we will be in the next lessons, we will be talking about how to solve these problems using techniques of flexible layouts, plus also things we discussed earlier. So if I just quickly recall your knowledge, especially concepts we will be using such as alternative layouts, stretchable images, density independence, the things we discussed in the previous lessons, we will be applying them practically and solving these problems. Okay, so the conclusion is you learn the base, you start doing practicals about screen compatibility, and you started using flexible layout using constraint layouts. This second bullet point, avoiding hard coding, we didn't do a practical, that we will do in the next lesson. So this avoiding hard coded layouts will be a practical in the next lesson. We use these references for this lecture, and make sure to look at the next lessons for you to get the complete understanding about screen compatibility and supporting different screen sizes and device compatibility. So we are very excited to see you in our next lesson. See you all in the next lesson.